Peter Ndoro and Borderless Afrika on Rise and Shine, the African Perspective.
Right, it's 7 minutes past 7 Central African time. Delegates from several African countries gathered for 3 days in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, pondering on African ideologies and how to advance the call for a borderless Africa. The conference also saw how the African Union sees concerns around the One Africa concept as they further planned on how to press African governments to ascribe to the one passport, one currency, one community agenda. Our Zambia correspondent is Arthur Davis Sukopo.
In a conference called Borderless African Convening, under the Africans Arising, the delegates spoke with visioned minds of turning countries into provinces, saying the artificial borders that we have created division amongst Africans. Hadi Yakobo is movement coordinator for Africans Arising.
Currently, European migration policy defines Africans as a security threat until you prove otherwise, which is racist, which is arrogant, which is ahistorical, but they have the right to define their own migration policy. The problem I have is that our own policymakers have now inherited that sort of thinking.
Pelubi Nobi of Nigeria in West Africa, who drove from London to Nigeria, traversing several countries, recounts how she encountered hurdles at border controls.
I was traveling with both my British and my Nigerian passports. I was able to easily access the African continent with my British passports in comparison to being a Nigerian and being from the continent itself. So the issues at the border, the lack of regulations, and more importantly, the freedom of Africans within the continent was something that was very, very revealing.
For Mutemi Wakiyama, the co-chairperson of Africans Arising, his message is simple.
Is our education system that continues to be colonial. Because when you talk about a borderless Africa, you're not just talking about physical borders. You're talking about the mental borders each of us have.
Many that attended were young people, but certainly not all, as they needed guidance and wisdom from elders. And it was through this that renowned Pan-Africanist philosopher Joshua Maponga had a long lecture on why Africa needs to be borderless.
The idea of Africa is altogether colonized, a colonized governance system also. We will not be able to talk about borderless Africa if we are not also honest to talk about one currency in Africa. Because we only have one passport in Africa, but now we need 54 currencies. Even our diet has been colonized. A borderless Africa will liberate our appetite.
The African Union, through Ambassador Salah Hamad, the head of the Secretariat of the African Governance Architecture, AGA, dispelled assertions that opening borders would be a threat, as he noted that, in fact, it will enhance security, as natives would want to guard their lands.
There will be less money to be spent on securing the borders. Why? Because the African citizens themselves will become the force of, in fact, controlling and protecting the borders for free. Why? Because it is
with their call to one passport, one currency, and freedom of movement within the continent without challenges, the Lusaka Borderless Convening ended with a march in the streets and issued a communique of resolutions, key among those urging African countries to actualize the process of having a borderless continent. As they collaborate with all Africans in this movement, they are calling on civil society, governments, political parties, private sector, and others to be part and help realize the borderless dream. Reporting for Channel Africa in Lusaka, Zambia, I'm Arthur Davis, Scopo.
Now, a group of anti-xenophobic groups have written to the South African government advising against the implementation of the final white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection. In a letter addressed to the country's president and Minister of Home Affairs, the Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia, the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa, and over 100 other organizations from across the continent are asking Pretoria not to compromise its commitment to human rights and dignity. Now, for more on this, we're joined on the line by the Communications and Media Officer at the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. That's been by